Hello and welcome to another edition of the TimeFlies podcast. I am, of course, your host, Ariel, and the Boston Celtics have won the 2023-2024 NBA championship, where everybody thought that Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, that the tandem of those two were not going to be able to win the championship after going to the Eastern Conference Finals, which seems like season in, season out for what, 6, 7, 8 years in a row and not being able to pull it out. But they have finally put the narrative to bed that those two players together cannot win a championship. So now, before I talk about the legacies of those two, Jaylen Brown individually, Joe Mazzulla, the Boston Celtics, where do they rank within recent NBA championships? Where do they rank within Boston Celtics championship lore? Before I talk about all that, I actually want to talk about game five from what I saw, some thoughts, some takes. And the first thing I want to talk about, I just want to talk about how Boston looked. It seemed like they were a little tight, and through the TV, I was able to tell that like it seemed like the crowd was super nervous. It just, I don't know, it's something weird that like when you're watching a game, and especially if a team is on the brink of winning a championship, I like to look at the subtle things. I like to look at the things that are not on the court. And one of the things I like to look at is the just the crowd. I like to see the body language, and it just seemed through the TV set that the crowd was walking on eggshells. It seemed like they were super excited and they were really ready to erupt to celebrate a championship, but they weren't sure if the Boston Celtics were going to come in and play like they are about to win the championship. That's just the first thing I noticed off the bat, which is very interesting. Now, as far as the game itself, Drew Holiday ended up scoring the first 6 points of the Boston Celtics, which is very interesting because, man, game five, you have the opportunity to win a championship. You have an opportunity to close out the series in front of your home crowd. If I was Jason Tatum, I'm coming out guns blazing. I'm attacking the rim on every possession that I touch the ball. I am shooting on every possession that I touch the ball because there's a lot of talk about Luka Doncic and how much of a dangerous player he is. Like if you give him a little bit of daylight and he smells fear and he sees a weakness, like he's gonna go in for blood. Like I've always pictured myself being the best player on an NBA championship team, and if I have the opportunity to close out the game, like I'm gonna do everything in my power to close out the game as fast as possible, giving the other team no life, making sure that the other team has no opportunity to have a feeling that they have a chance of winning this game. So with Drew Holiday scoring the first 6 points of the game, Jason Tatum's actual first field goal came with what, 2 minutes left in the first quarter? That could be a lot of things. That could be nerves. That could be him not trying to force the game. There's a really hard balance that players have to really be cognizant of trying to force it and letting the game come to you. So I don't know what that was with Jason Tatum. So maybe he was doing a mixture of the two, but Jason Tatum scoring his first bucket with 2 minutes left in the first quarter, so 8 minutes with nothing. That's something that really stuck out to me. And on the complete opposite side, the Dallas Mavericks, they actually impressed me with the way they came out. They looked a little bit more relaxed. They looked like they were just really trying. Luka, especially, was looking like he was trying to involve everybody. Derek Lively, to be exact, it looked like he was trying to make it a point to include him, to make him feel comfortable within the offense. And as soon as KP checked into the game, where KP, when he checked into the game, the crowd was going crazy. That's also a little bit of a subplot for this Boston Celtics team. Like KP looked like he was the designated superhero for the team. Every time he would walk to the scorer's table to check in, the crowd was going crazy and they erupted. So like I didn't really know Kristaps Porzingis had that kind of relationship with the Boston Celtics crowd. But anyway, going back to the Dallas Mavericks, like one of the things that I saw was that KP, when he was in the game, they automatically attacked KP. They automatically tried to go to switches. They automatically were hunting KP. And that's what I mean about seeing Dallas and how comfortable they were with their game plan and knowing that they were only one game away from being bounced out of the playoffs. Like they just looked a lot more relaxed than Boston Celtics did to start off the game. And of course, I got to talk about Peyton Pritchard with that, first half heave. Like it looks like the Boston Celtics and Joe Mazzulla, it looks like they draw up plays for Peyton Pritchard to come into the game with like 5 seconds left in the first half. And it looks like they're like, yo, Payne, we're drawing up this play for you to make a half court heave. That way you're able to give us some sort of momentum to go into the second half, give us some sort of energy, give us some sort of boost. And this is, I think, the second time that he did it. And the first time, I'm not sure if it was in Dallas, if it was in game three, or if it was in game three, or if it was in game two in Boston. I'm not sure when that game was. But this is the second time where Peyton Pritchard hit a huge end of the first half shot where the crowd was going nuts. And through the TV, I was able to see that the crowd was going absolutely nuts when Peyton Pritchard hit that half court shot. So I'm going to be going back and forth from what I saw from Boston, from what I saw from Dallas. And on the Dallas side, I hate to say it, man, Kyrie Irving had another disappointing game. Kyrie Irving, who's one of my favorite players to watch, as far as skills, I think Kyrie Irving might be the most skilled player I've ever seen in my life. Being able to handle the ball with both hands, being able to finish at the rim with both hands. And when I say finish at the rim with both hands, I'm talking about with no problems whatsoever. There was that regular season game where he beat the Denver Nuggets at the buzzer with a left-handed, not even a hook shot. It was like a left-handed push. Kyrie Irving is one of, if not the most skilled player I've ever seen in my lifetime. But going specifically to game five, Kyrie Irving was having a rough game, man. I mean, at one point he was 2 of 10 from the field. And in the third quarter, with a minute and 30 seconds left, he had 9 points. He was 3 of 12 from the field, and he was 1 of 6 from three-point land. And as far as Luka having someone there next to him to being able to play alongside him, being able to rely on somebody else like Kyrie Irving, I think it's safe to say for that the final series against the Boston Celtics, like he wasn't that guy. He had glimpses and he had moments in every game, basically. But as far as a complete body of work, can you say Luka Doncic was able to rely on Kyrie Irving? And he just wasn't. And Boston, for the most part, they were getting a lot of second chance opportunities. Like a lot of the players, Drew Holiday, Sam Hauser, Luke Cornett, all the tap outs, like Boston Celtics, they were getting a lot of second chance opportunities, but then like they just weren't able to convert. And that's where I saw like the nerves come in. It seemed like they were doing everything right up until the point where they actually had to put the ball in the bucket. They did all the hustle plays. They dived on the floor. Luke Cornett, like I said, he had all the tap outs. But then when they were supposed to close out the possession with a bucket, they just weren't able to. So it's like they did like 90% of the job. And then the last 10%, they just didn't finish it. And the Dallas Mavericks, what they absolutely needed for game five, they needed their three-pointers and they needed their shots to go in. And throughout the game, I was taking notes. And with 10 minutes and 30 seconds left in the fourth quarter, Dallas Mavericks was 7 of 30 from three-point line, which usually is not going to get it done whatsoever. So with 9 minutes left, Dallas was down by 21 points. But even with all that time left and Dallas being down by 21, watching the game, I personally still felt that Boston, they were still leaving the door open. Like again, like I keep saying, like you can tell through the TV that the Boston Celtics, like they were nervous. Like they were doing everything they can to make sure that the lead was large enough that they didn't have to worry. But even with the 21-point lead, like they still looked nervous. It's still I still felt the nervousness from them from the TV set. And one of the reasons why I felt like everybody was nervous, the crowd at the stadium, me through the TV, was because one of the things that Boston Celtics do is they're one of, if not the best team in the league when they're moving the ball around and there's a lot of body movement, back screens, regular screens, everybody backdooring. Like the Boston Celtics are one of the better teams in the league. But what's one of their downfalls is when everybody starts being lethargic. And I'm specifically talking about Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. When they start doing hero isolation basketball, when Jason Tatum's at the top of the key and he's putting the ball through his legs, left and right, behind the bag, and then he attacks the rim, and everybody is just staring at him. Same thing with Jaylen Brown when he does that as well. The Boston Celtics, like they open up the door for teams to come back. And that's what they were doing at one point in this game. And that's why I felt like Dallas, even though with that 21-point lead, with 9 minutes left in the game, like I still felt Dallas had an opportunity to come back into the game. But something that really stood out to me from that game was Jaylen Brown. Man, I was just so impressed with Jaylen Brown throughout this series and throughout the game. Throughout the telecast, there was a lot of moments where it's like sounds of the game, and Jaylen Brown was one of the players that was mic'd. And one of the sound bites that they showed that really stuck out to me was I think Jaylen Brown and the Boston Celtics, they were going towards the bench because it was a TV timeout. And then Jaylen Brown, before he goes to the bench, he goes to the coaching staff and he tells them, he's like, "Hey, if Luka is still in the game, I'm still in the game. Don't take me out. Only take me out if Luka is out of the game." And you can tell by the way Jaylen Brown was playing throughout this final series that like he made it a point to try not shut down Luka because nobody's gonna shut down Luka, but he tried to make it a point to slow down Luka as much as possible. And I really saw that in game five. Like Jaylen Brown was picking up Luka 94 feet. Like he was just making it difficult. He was just making sure to let Luka know that like he's gonna be in front of him for the entire night. And yeah, Luka's probably gonna get his buckets. You're probably gonna score on me, but I'm not going to make it easy. It's going to be difficult. Whatever the stat sheet was for Luka at the end of the night, like if he ended up with 21, 22 points, whatever it was, like you're going to make sure I'm going to make sure that you worked for all of those 21, 22 points for the night. And you can make an argument that that's one of the biggest reasons why the Boston Celtics were able to win the championship because you can tell that Jaylen Brown really didn't care about who was going to be looked at as the best player in the series. Like he took on the assignment between him and Drew Holiday. They took on the assignment of trying to shut down Luka Doncic. And Luka, especially game three, like Luka was completely just embarrassed by the NBA media because of the way he was whining and crying to the refs, complaining about every single call. After game three, the NBA media, Brian Windhorst went in on him. Like everybody from First Take, Colin Cowherd, like Twitter, NBA Twitter. All I saw on the internet and on TV was everybody complaining about how much Luka was complaining to the refs. And that was definitely part of the Boston Celtics strategy. They were trying to make sure that Luka was going to be worn down. They were going to make him frustrated as much as possible because when he gets frustrated, it's really hard for him to hide his emotions. And when he expresses his emotions, it's pretty much just him bitching. And when Luka starts bitching, it seems like it takes him out of his game. It seems like it takes him out of his rhythm, out of his just zone. Now, I don't want to say going into game five that there was no doubt that the Boston Celtics were going to win that game because all the way up until what? I don't know, 6 minutes left in the game, 6 minutes left in the fourth quarter. That's when I was like, oh, okay, Boston, they're more than likely gonna win this. Um, and then they ended up winning the game, and Jaylen Brown actually won the Finals MVP, man. And that's another reason why I'm just so impressed with Jaylen Brown. Like he won the Eastern Conference Finals MVP, and then he won the NBA Finals MVP. As far as the stats, averaging 20.8 points, 5.4 rebounds, and 5 assists. Like and then the numbers with Jason Tatum, they're kind of similar. I mean, Jason Tatum averaged 22 points to Jaylen Brown's 20.8. Jason Tatum averaged 7.8 rebounds to Jaylen Brown's 5.4 rebounds. Jason Tatum averaged 7.2 assists to Jaylen Brown's 5 assists. So, I mean, it's not like Jaylen Brown's stats were like significantly better than Jason Tatum's, but maybe this is something that a lot of younger players should take a look at when you're going to sacrifice for your team. I mean, it kind of was a sacrifice because Jaylen Brown, he really focused in on a defensive end against Luka Doncic, but he was still able to provide some sort of offensive output. So Jaylen Brown really stepping out on the ledge and sacrificing himself to really try and shut down the best offensive player on the other team. If you're listening to this podcast for the young players, for the young hoopers, take notes. But now that Jaylen Brown won the Finals MVP, you know there is no doubt that the talk around Jason Tatum, that the talk around the NBA Twitter is all going to be about Jason Tatum not winning the Finals MVP. So, I mean, I gotta do it, man. Like, where does this leave Jason Tatum? I mean, personally, when I saw Jaylen Brown raise that Finals MVP trophy, the first thing that I thought is Jason Tatum is officially in the Steph Curry conversation before Steph Curry won that NBA championship and before Steph Curry won that Finals MVP in 2022 when he beat the Boston Celtics, ironically. But I mean, Jason Tatum for the series, 22 points, 7.8 rebounds, and 7.2 assists. If we take a look at the numbers for each game, game one, he had 16 points. He was 6 of 16 from the field, which equates to 37.5%. Three-point land, he was 3 of 7, which equates to 43%. Game two, Jason Tatum had 18 points, 6 of 22 from the field, 27.3%, and 1 of 7 from three-point land, which is 14.3%. Not great at all. Game three, Jason Tatum had 31 points, 11 of 26 from the field, 42.3% from the field, 4 of 13 from three-point land, which equates to 30.8%. Game four, Jason Tatum had 15 points, 4 of 10 from the field, which is 40%, 1 of 4 from three-point land, which is 25%. And then in game five, he ended the game with 31 points. He was 11 of 24 from the field, which equates to 45.8%, 1 of 7 from three-point land, which is 14.3%. So I mean, if you take a look at the numbers game by game, you can make the argument that Jason Tatum only had two good games, which was in game three and which was in game five. And then Jaylen Brown, the numbers 20.8 points, 5.4 rebounds, and 5 assists. In game one, Jaylen Brown had 22 points, 7 of 12 from the field, which is 58.3%, 2 of 6 from three-point line, which is 33.3%. In game two, he had 21 points, and he was 8 of 15 from the field, which equates to 53.3%, 1 of 5 from three-point line, which is 20%. In game three, Jaylen Brown had 30 points. He was 12 of 22 from the field, 54.5%, 2 of 9 from three-point line, 22.2%. In game four, he had 10 points. That's probably his worst game, but that was the Boston Celtics in general worst game. He was 3 of 12 from the field, 25%. He was 1 of 5 from three-point line, which is 20%. And then in game five, he had 21 points, 7 of 23 from the field, which is 30.4%, 2 of 9 from three-point line, which is 22.2%. So I mean, Jaylen Brown, it looks like he did have more of the consistency in the series. Game one, 22 points, game two, 21, game three, 30. Game four, 10, which again is his worst game of the series, but that was the worst game for the Boston Celtics in general. In game five, he had 21 points. So Jaylen Brown, I mean, I get it. I understand why they gave him the NBA Finals MVP trophy. But with Jason Tatum, man, this is going to be interesting. This is going to be interesting to see how he bounces back next season, to see if he's really going to try and make it a point to go for the Finals MVP if the Boston Celtics they get back to the NBA Finals. The narrative for the NBA media, they're still going to be touting these two against each other about like, oh, Jason Tatum is actually the best player on the team, but Jaylen Brown won the Finals MVP. So is Jason Tatum the best player on the team? Like, if you're a basketball fan, if you're about this, you know that Jason Tatum is the best player on the team. But Jason Tatum, throughout the final series, there was quotes and there was articles and there was interviews with Malika Andrews, and he was saying how like he doesn't care about all that stuff anymore. And he admitted that there was a point in time of their relationship where he did care about that. He wanted everybody to know that it was his team. But throughout this finals appearance, the interviews, like I said, with Malika Andrews, all the articles, he said that he doesn't care about all that stuff anymore. He just wants to win. He just wants to place that ring on his finger. And again, if you're a young hooper and by some chance you come across this podcast, take notes. All that talk about you being the best player on the team, but you not winning, all that talk goes away if you win. If you win and you get that championship ring, all that stuff goes away. Again, Jason Tatum is in a little bit of a weird place because he does have the championship ring. So the talk around his name is going to be a little different. But like I said earlier, he's in the same conversation when Steph Curry didn't have a finals MVP, but he had all those final championships. Kevin Durant had those two finals MVPs back to back. Andre Iguodala won that finals MVP when he shut down LeBron James. So everybody knew Steph Curry was the best player on the team, minus the two Kevin Durant years or 3 years. So everybody knew Steph Curry was the best player on the team. So why don't you have a finals MVP? It's just a weird thing that the NBA media does, man. Obviously, they need things to talk about, and it makes everything a lot more interesting. But I'm really interested to see how Jason Tatum is going to come back next season, man. Jason Tatum and the Boston Celtics. And speaking about repeating, feel like, listen, I'm not going to take anything away from the Boston Celtics, man. They played against the opponents that were in front of them. They had no control over injuries. But we got to go through it. I did this in the previous episode. We got to go through it, man. The first round against Miami, no Jimmy Butler, but Jimmy Butler is known to rise to the occasion. What he's known as, in my opinion, Jimmy Jordan in the playoffs. Look at what he did to the Milwaukee Bucks last year in the first round, having 40-point burger balls, having 50-point burger balls. And that was when Drew Holiday was a part of the team. So again, going back to this playoff run, the first round in Miami with no Jimmy Butler, Miami was actually able to get a game, which was very surprising. I mean, they won the game by shooting stupendously from the field. I mean, I think they were, I don't know what the exact numbers were, but they were like completely on God mode and they won in Boston. I believe it was game two. But that was the only game that Miami won. Then Boston pretty much woke up and they finished the series in five. The next round going against Cleveland Cavaliers, they finished the series in five. Donovan Mitchell goes out with a calf strain, and I believe he missed the last game or two of the series. And I think Cleveland won game two in Boston. But after they won game two, again, Boston woke up and was like, oh, okay, we actually have to like really put this team away. But again, Donovan Mitchell being injured, Jarrett Allen, of course, I didn't mention him with the whole rib injury. He missed the entire series. So again, second round against Cleveland, they woke up, they took care of business. In the Eastern Conference Finals against the Indiana Pacers, they swept the Indiana Pacers, where the Pacers had no business being there. But again, why did the Indiana Pacers end up there? Because in the first round against Milwaukee, Giannis couldn't play because he really messed up his calf, I believe, like a week or two prior to the playoff starting. And then within the playoffs, Damian Lillard messed up his calf, and I think it was game two or three. And Damian Lillard tried to gut it out, but he wasn't 100%. So Indiana Pacers were able to get rid of Milwaukee Bucks. After the Milwaukee Bucks, who did the Indiana Pacers play? They played a depleted Knicks team. Jalen Brunson ended up hurting his foot in game two of that series. Josh Hart ending up getting an abdominal muscle strain in what, game four or game five. Mitchell Robinson wasn't healthy. OG Anunoby wasn't healthy. Julius Randle was out for the rest of the season back in like January 27th, I believe is when the injury happened to his shoulder. So the Indiana Pacers, they lucked out. Kudos to them winning game seven in the Garden, which I personally did not see coming because every game that they were on the road in New York, they just completely shit the bed, specifically Tyrese Halliburton. But of course, in game seven, where we were not expecting it, again, kudos to Tyrese Halliburton and Indiana Pacers. They came up big and they actually won. So kudos to them. But then when they beat the New York Knicks, they had to face the Boston Celtics and they ended up getting swept. What does that actually say about the Indiana Pacers? So again, man, the Boston Celtics, like I'm not taking anything away from them, but we also got to put it into context. We also got to take a look at the opponents that they were going up against. So now this leads me to my point. What would it have looked like if the Boston Celtics were actually going up against the Denver Nuggets? What would it have looked like if the Boston Celtics went up against the Minnesota Timberwolves? Because Dallas against Minnesota was a better matchup for Dallas. But if Dallas went up against Denver, I think Denver would have beat Dallas in the Western Conference Finals. But Minnesota, after they beat Denver in the Western Conference semifinals, it was pretty obvious that they thought that was their championship, and then they completely took their foot off the gas when they met up against Dallas in the Western Conference Finals, only winning one game, and I still can't wrap my head around it. I don't understand it. Like Anthony Edwards was playing out of his mind against Denver. They took out the champions. And there's that saying, if you want to be a champion, you got to beat the champion. And I think a lot of people said that whoever comes out of that series between Denver and Minnesota, those were going to be the eventual champions. And that was not the case. Minnesota beat Denver in 7 games in Denver. And then they go on to play Dallas and they completely shit the bed. It's like they didn't even know how to play basketball, which I like I said earlier, I still don't understand what happened. Like I feel like they had the right pieces. The only thing I'll give a little slack to Minnesota, but it's not really even a slack, is what I noticed with Luka is I feel like Luka really has a big problem. Whoever's guarding him, if they're like bigger than him, and when I say bigger, I don't mean height, I mean girth. And case in point, Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown, for the most part, was on Luka, and look at how disturbed Luka was for this entire series. Drew Holiday had his moments against Luka as well, and the thing, but Drew is like an alien. Like he's regarded as one of the best defenders of all time. He might not be taller than Luka. Luka's definitely taller than him, but Drew is just stronger, and he's like low key slept on strength. Like people are just aren't able to move him. But that's something I noticed about Luka. Luka has a really hard time when he has defenders on him that are bigger than him, height wise or muscle wise. And when I start talking about Minnesota, Jaden McDaniels was the one that was guarding Luka for the most part. Jaden McDaniels is taller than Luka, but when you look at him, he is kind of frail. And Luka is 6'7", 6'8", I believe, but he has a lot more girth to him. So he was able to move Jaden McDaniels around a lot more easier. But still, this Minnesota Timberwolves, their team was just full of athleticism. Jaden McDaniels, Anthony Edwards, I mean, Kill Alexander Walker coming off the bench, Nas Reed coming off the bench. I still feel like they had viable pieces to throw at Luka, but I just keep coming back to this, man. Like, I don't know what happened to Minnesota. I don't know what happened to the coaching staff. Like, Chris Finch, whatever, he messed up his knee and he wasn't really able to be on the sideline. Like, I don't really know if I want to use that as an excuse because he was still there. So I don't know if it was a coaching blunder or I just don't know if they completely forgot how to play defensive basketball. But like, I really thought Minnesota was going to come out of that series. But again, going back to the whole Boston Celtics, would they have won a championship if they faced off against the Denver Nuggets in the finals or the Minnesota Timberwolves in the finals? We'll never know. Dallas did what they had to do. They beat Minnesota in the Western Conference Finals. They got to the finals and they ended up losing to the Boston Celtics in 5. So, like I said in the beginning of this rant, the Boston Celtics did what they had to do. They just played whoever was in front of them, which you can't blame them for. And one of the last things that I want to point out before I wrap up the video is somebody else that I want to give kudos to is Joe Mazzulla, man. Last season, man, he just got completely annihilated by the NBA media. Like everybody was just talking about, like, he doesn't know what the hell he's doing. Mind you, last season was his first season, and he became the coach. He became the head coach of the team. What, like I think like 3 days prior to training camp because of the whole Ime Udoka situation. And then he's just thrust into the spotlight. And on top of that, like Damon Stoudemire left. Will Hardy took the Utah Jazz coaching job. So a lot of the coaches that he had on the staff weren't even his guys. Like everybody was just shitting on him last season. And like I said earlier, he was just thrust into the spotlight and he was able to bring the Boston Celtics to the Eastern Conference Finals. And he was able to bring them to the Eastern Conference Finals to a game 7 after going down 3-0 to the Miami Heat, where no team was ever been able to come back from a 3-0 deficit. But he was able to bring them back from 3-0, tie it up at 3-3. Eventually, Miami won in Boston, which is still kind of crazy. But Joe Mazzulla this season completely turning it around, and like you can tell that it was just a completely different Joe Mazzulla. Like he knew what he was doing. And there's been a lot of critique about just him using timeouts and him using a lot of particular plays, ATOs, just like DHOs, just his offensive schemes and defensive schemes. Like he was getting a lot of flack for it. So I just wanted to give Joe Mazzulla some flowers. Like, yo, you got my respect. Like you came back and you shut everybody up. And that's one of the big things with this team. By winning this championship, there's so many different people in this organization that shut everybody up. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, they shut everybody up, telling everybody like, no, we can actually win a championship together when everybody was saying like, yo, you got to break this up. And Joe Mazzulla and telling everybody that they got to shut up, that I'm actually a really good basketball coach. Like I know what the hell I'm doing. Brad Stevens telling everybody to shut up after trading Marcus Smart, after trading for Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis. Kristaps Porzingis, who in my opinion is still never going to be able to be healthy for a full NBA season. Like Kristaps Porzingis, like KP, man, like he's able to get a championship ring and he wasn't even a part of this. Like he played in what the first 2 3 games of the Miami Heat series, and then he missed the next month and a half, and then he came back in what game 2 or 3 against Dallas Mavericks, and then he messed up his foot again. Yo, KP is the luckiest player ever, man. Like this guy, don't get it twisted. Like, great, yeah, you were able to contribute to the team, contribute to this championship run, but did you really? Like, you were able to offer some emotional support. Like, good for you, man. Able to offer some emotional support. But as far as you still proving to me personally, I'm only talking about me, you proving to me that you're actually a viable player to have on your team, no. You still haven't proved it. How about being healthy for more than 4 weeks? How about being healthy for at least a full NBA season and not being healthy for a team that literally has no reason to play, a la the Washington Wizards? Be healthy for a full season when you're on a team where it matters. Like, the New York Knicks, all those years where he was healthy, like it didn't matter because they didn't weren't going anywhere. The Dallas Mavericks, like he didn't get along with Luka. He's even admitted it himself. He was on the JJ Redick podcast, I believe, last summer, and he said that he needed to grow up. Like he wanted the team to be his, and he didn't like the way Rick Carlisle, who was a coach of the team at the time, he didn't like the way that he was using him. So KP, man, he was immature. Like, and every stop you can point to something and being like, were you a reason why that team was successful, or were you more of the reason why the team wasn't successful? Like KP, man, like come on, man. You still gotta prove it to me, bro. Like, great, you have a ring, obviously, cool. Legacy is somewhat cemented, but just be healthy. Just be healthy, man. Prove to NBA fans, prove to the people who are really about this that you can be a viable option on the team, being healthy for a full season, and that includes the playoff run. That includes being healthy throughout the NBA finals. Prove to us that you're actually a viable NBA player. And that's my KP rant. It's not hate. That's just me talking facts, man. And it's not hate just because KP was part of the Knicks and then he went to Dallas. Like, it's not his fault that he got traded. I mean, he might have asked for a trade, but in my opinion, like, I never really wanted to keep him because a player of his height and his size, 7'3", playing outside on the perimeter mostly, like those players just don't last, man. They don't last. And KP is another player just within the myriad of examples that I can point to, 7'3", 7'4", who end up having health problems. Ralph Sampson, Greg Oden, Yao Ming. And we're gonna see what happens with this Victor Wembanyama kid, who's an absolute alien unicorn, who's like, it's like he's part of the symbiote Venom suit. Like he came from outer space and it just landed here and it's like, and it attached himself to some human being, and now it ended up becoming Victor Wembanyama. I don't know, man. That kid's future is ridiculously bright, and hopefully he's able to have more healthy seasons than KP has had so far. But guys, that's it for today's episode. I want to say thank you so much for checking it out. The Boston Celtics have finally done it. They've shut everybody up. They have won the 2023-2024 NBA championship. I've talked about all the narratives that's going to be coming along, the NBA media talking about if the Boston Celtics can repeat, where does this rank within the Boston Celtics championship lore? Where does this rank within the last few NBA championships? The only thing that we can actually nitpick here is Jason Tatum. If Jason Tatum is really the best player on the Boston Celtics, when is he going to finally achieve that goal of getting that finals MVP? I feel like Jaylen Brown's in the clear, man. Jaylen Brown is so in the clear, man. Jason Tatum, now the NBA media is going to be all over your back. If you guys don't have a successful season, going to an Eastern Conference Finals, going to an NBA Finals, winning another NBA Finals, a lot of the talk is going to be on your back, man. And I'm sorry to say because I love watching you play, man. I love your game inside out. You added about like 25 to 30 pounds of muscle. And in game five, one of the things that I didn't mention is how you just bullied your way to the basket, which is something that you should be doing a lot more. Stop relying on the 3-point shot, bro. Mix it up, mid-range, post up, attack the rim. The game would be so much easier for you. But it's going to be so interesting to see what the media does with Jason Tatum and how they talk about him. But guys, thank you so much for checking out this episode. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit that thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. It'll be a really big help. And now that the NBA season is over, I'm going to be trying to put out more episodes and I'm going to be talking about movies. I've seen a bunch of movies as of late. Most recently, I saw Bad Boys. I saw the movie, I saw the TV Glow. I saw the movie with my guy Ryan Gosling. I saw Fall Guy. I saw Civil War. I've seen so many movies within the last few months, but basketball has just been in the forefront of my mind. So I'm going to be putting out some episodes just talking about those movies, what I like, and just what I took away from it. If you're listening to this on any of the podcast streaming platforms, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. Please remember to do so. That'll be a really big help. But until the next episode, I'll check you guys out later. And I'm going to leave you with one thing. The 2024-2025 NBA champions will be the New York Knicks. I'll check you guys out later. Peace.